conversation set up with you guys today. I want to talk. This is a full circle moment. When I started my gap year to speak, I used to do these podcasts with my mom in the living room. We had everything set up. We had the little light set up. We had the mic set up, and we would be talking to nobody. And we would talk to nobody for a while. And now here we are on the radio because I have my mom joining us. What we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be talking about the other side. We always have guests in here doing interesting interviews, talking about real relevant community issues and community topics. But a common theme that we see across the board is that a lot of the issues are deeper than just one or two people leading the charge. We need people in the community making a change. And so we're going to talk about today, within my vein of communication, because I am a communication coach, we're going to talk about how you can use communication to make a change in the community, in any community. It doesn't have to just be where you live, but if you're a part of a community of your profession, whatever you call it, making a change requires a certain level of skill. And to put all the responsibility and trust on leaders is not correct, right? Because you can have the best shepherd in the world, but you still have to be a faithful sheep, not to make it, get into that whole Bible shepherd and sheep analogy. But before I get into it, I want to first explain and get a chance for my mom to introduce herself. I know it's going to seem like, you got your mom on the show, but she is a business lady. This is the reason I got into business, and I want you guys to hear her credibility before she starts speaking, so we have guests on here that know what they're talking about. So, Miss Martin, if you would like to introduce yourself and talk about your history in business, you definitely can.
Okay, well, before we get started, I do want to say, because the guest wasn't here, there is an announcement that I want to make about her organization. It was the Cooperation Buffalo. They actually have the Cooperative Academy. The applications are due today, August 7th. It is a 12-week program where you can learn about what it looks like to have cooperative workers, meaning that people don't just work for you, but they are partial owners in your business. And it's going to be hosted at the Foundry, which is on Northampton. And again, the classes are going to go from August 30th to November 15th from 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. live in person. So if you are watching this and you are on all of the live streams, Jim's page or others, there is a website link. Make sure that you go in there. Now, one of the criteria, I was doing some research because I was fascinated about this, is you do need to have a team of 3 so that you can not just learn about that concept, but you can execute and actually have your business structured that way, where it is that cooperative approach, where you're not doing things on your own. So as this is a great segue into myself, my name is Latasha Martin, and I've been in some form of business since 1997. Oh my goodness, that's a long time. But for the last 8.5 years, I've been in business, where really my job is working with people to go from confusion to clarity, and then clarity to, I will say, cash. So if it's an individual that's trying to launch a business or navigate their career, I really help you get clear on those objectives and then show you a way to monetize that so that you're not out here hustling, not making any money. I've been there, done that. So today I'm here with my son. I'm not going to give any more. You can find me, Latasha 115959, anywhere. But please check out that organization, Cooperative Buffalo. And Austin, I'm going to go ahead and let you lead the conversation on communication with community.
Absolutely. And talking about Cooperative Buffalo, like you talked about that sense of community working together, that's so true. Everybody in a system plays a role. And you were an engineer, so if you have a big system like the world, a big system, and one gear is out of place, what happens?
It's a mess.
The machine breaks down. And so what I think a big breakdown we have in our communities is we have an issue with making sure that the people themselves and the issues are connected in a way that's relevant. And one thing we talk about a lot within communication is the gap, right? And I'll give an example of what that gap is. A politician. I've never in my life, if you're a politician, you've never in your life probably touched a water plumbing pipe. You probably never did construction, but yet you make decisions on policies that affect those that do, right? And so if you don't have a foundation or a good understanding of where the perspective of those workers, business owners, and blue collar workers are coming from, oftentimes when you then go to make a change, the information and things, that the vessels and vehicles that you try to use to make that change aren't always the most effective because they're not the most relevant. And I think oftentimes in our communities, if leaders had more ways, people and leaders, alike, to communicate and bridge that gap through communication, I feel like, and I know for a fact that the issues that we have in our communities would be fixed quicker because now they apply to me. And when I do my interviews, you can attest that I always talk about, but how is that? Try to think about how is that relevant to the regular person.
Right.
And I think that issue that people miss oftentimes, even within the guests in our show, the issue or the problem that they miss sometimes with connecting with the guests, that they don't have the conversations, they don't hear people out. Because like I said, as an interviewer, I haven't done all the things that I interview people on, but that's why it's my job to ask questions and listen. So
Right.
when we're talking about making a change as someone in business, right? You even have experience in change management. What are things in your opinion that when you talk about making a community change are really important, especially on that communicational side?
So when I think about communication, specifically for myself, when I first started into business or in business, one of the gaps on why I wouldn't attract the right type of customers, or I would go through these hills and valleys, these ebbs and flows. And so the reason why is because I would use a lot of technical language. So what does that look like? So if I was talking to anybody, I would always say, you know what, I do organizational development and I help businesses with their human capital. And people are like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so when I think about effective communication with politicians or in our communities, I think there's a gap a lot of times because people are talking in language where they're not hitting a mark. And so one of the things I love when I talk to you is even when I'm speaking on things, you challenge me to break it down so that it makes sense and so that our heart connects, but then there's still logic. So I think in communities or even with some of the people that we've talked to, one of the opportunities is how do they connect what they do to the communities that they're called to serve? And I think that can happen in the actual city of Buffalo, or if you are a business owner trying to connect that to the communities that you feel that you are called to lead or influence. And so I think that that's one of the biggest pieces is that you have to be able to be relatable and communicate effectively. And then when people do win, right, when they win these opportunities to connect with people. So there was a big election that just happened a couple of months ago. And the people who won, I think it was their ability to connect to the issues of the people that they were calling to serve. But then on the flip side, because I think there's two types of communication with politicians, it's connecting to the people that you're called to serve, and then connecting to the systems and the people who are running those systems, connect to them to say, I'm available and I'm able to do it. Because even though they may be existing people in those systems, those legislative bodies, I think that they need to have the confidence in you and they can actually influence in areas that you can't. And that's something that I had to learn, even with you. Like we talk a lot about communication with communities. You come in with the Gen Z, I come in with the Gen X. We have totally different perspectives on things that we see. So that's what I would say.
And I even want to talking about why it's relevant. Why does this conversation even matter? You might have turned on your radio to 96.5 on accident. You might want to call in at 716-837-1112 by accident. I don't know what you got going on, but why is it important to the community to hear? Why is it important to make a change? Anytime you're working on something that's new, because we're not happy with the world we live in. Right, we're not happy. We complain. We're not happy. This is not the world we think. This is not the Buffalo that we envision. A lot of Buffalonians envision, or they had experience with. We want a better Buffalo. When you're not happy and you want to make a change, you have to understand that is a process, and making a change is difficult. And anytime you're trying to bring something new, that's a change. And so understanding the science of change, you might not be in business. You might be at school and say, hey, I want to run for student council president.
Wait, 20-second timeout. Did we say hi to Jim and thank him for giving us the opportunity and the privilege? I know we had some last minute things that were happening. So we want to pause and acknowledge the great guru of conversations with Jim Anderson.
Oh, yeah,
he's doing global work.
Global work in Japan right now, doing some international peace talks on nuclear disarmament. And that's a lot of big words, but it means put the nukes down and let's just talk it out if you want the basic explanation. But you need someone to talk about that. And as a mentor like Jim, like you said, I want to definitely say thank you and acknowledge that, because these are the teachings that we talked about. These are what me and Jim were talking about as far as the community and how you make changes. And then going back to what I was saying, it's that awareness piece. So anytime you're bringing something new, maybe you're not in business in the community. Maybe you just want to run for student council president. Maybe you don't want to run for student council president. Maybe you don't want to change the community. Maybe you just want to start having different conversations at your workplace. And understanding how to bring a change about in a way that works for everybody. I'll tell you right now, 90% of making a change is awareness.
And
it's awareness. Because you, like we said, you can talk in the clouds all day you want, but if I don't know what that means, you want me to listen to you and then do research on what you're saying and then buy? Oh no, you're acting crazy.
Yeah, and I
So
think that's the key in communication, right? And communication is so important that you don't forget to speak in the voice of the person that has the problem that you have the solution to. And I see that a lot. Like, I always, whenever people come in, I said, I'm not really into politics because I'm not. But I think as a person who has been doing people work for over 20 years and understanding how are some people able to influence and change the world like a Steve Jobs, right? Like, how did Steve Jobs make a decision that I'm not even going to just have computers, but you're going to do it my way? Like, the Apple way is totally different, where when I look at Microsoft, it's always reacting to whatever everything else is happening. Doesn't matter what your preference is, but the bottom line is that's a bold stance. So how did he effectively communicate to people that they needed to not only do stuff different, but the buying decision was different. The customer service experience now was different. I think it all goes into communication. But one of the things I'm going to ask you as a communication person is, as a young person with so much information, how do you see like young people being able to affect their communities? Again, whether it's an actual community or a community they want to influence by using effective communication.
I think you can change your communities and place that you go to as a young person, because the beauty of communication is, as a young person, if you're really good at communication, you don't have to call yourself young anymore, because communication isn't age-based. We all communicate, no matter if you're 80 or 8. If you can form a word or form a sentence in the English language, I could talk to you. So the beauty of communication, I feel like, for young people is the better you learn to communicate, the less the things you go up against matter, right? I'm 19, I'm young, I'm Black. I know what I'm going up against. I'm a young Black male in America, and I don't want to make it race, but if we want to take it there, let's take it there. We always talk about what we're starting up against, but I don't see myself that way. I see myself as Austin, because I can communicate myself and explain my position and my experiences and how they make me not different, but alike. Because everybody can tell we're different. Oh, I'm 6'3", you're whatever. Everybody say we're different.
Short. I know I'm
short.
I'm a whole foot shorter than you,
and
that's okay.
I'm saying gravity just might have pulled you a little harder.
But I do think, real talk though, even on something like that with communication, right? You have to have self-awareness on how you're showing up holistically when you want to effectively communicate. And I think for me, now we can let's change it to be real. I think when I look at younger people, too often you jump, in my opinion, y'all could call in. Somebody support me on the lines, 837-1112. I think too often, like, y'all haven't, sometimes I feel like you haven't earned the privilege to navigate through things like y'all think y'all can in the world of communication or personal expression.
Can you elaborate a little deeper?
I sure can. So, for example, I always share with everybody my age. I'm 52 years old. I have been doing this work for 20 years. So if I went in to negotiate a conversation or a contract with someone for a B2B or even an individual, my fee, what I'm bringing, I have earned through not just my age and time I've been doing things, but there's some things that I feel like I have a privilege to do in a different way when I communicate. So let me be more specific. When I show up and I know I'm going to a business meeting, I do a culture temperature check. If this is a culture where they wear suits, they speak and they say Mr. So-and-so and Mrs. So-and-so, and it's very strict and rigid, then I will align to that, because if I want to infect that, I can't go in just saying I'm going to be me. What I see with young people is they will say, well, I want to be me on the words that I use, the way that I show myself up, the way I dress, with my verbal and my nonverbal communication. And then they're frustrated. This is the word that drives me nuts, when they don't get respected.
Okay, so my question to you is this, and you can elaborate as much as you want. You talked about the privilege to show up as you want. When do you earn that privilege?
I think you earn that privilege. Oh, you got to step away for a second. I think you earn that privilege. He has to step away for just a moment. I think you earn that privilege when you have had enough of an impact on the people that you think you're here to impact a change or provide a solution for. And you're in a place of authority versus a place of I just need work. So I'm up there hustling and grinding. And so one of the examples that I use while he stepped away is when I look at sometimes when people want to emulate people who have different types of roles. So for example, if I look at an NBA player or NFL player or somebody that's on a certain level of celebrity, and they are in a position where they can like navigate how they want to do things, they may not have to dress a certain way anymore because they have influence and they don't need someone to say yes or concede to the way of the cultural norms. And so that's what I think is the place when people have that option. So while he's still out there, what I also want to say is I would encourage you to call today. If you are someone that's listening to this radio station today and you're frustrated because you don't feel that your voice is being heard and you want some tips on how you could effectively communicate and connect with people that you want to influence. So I would encourage you to go ahead and call in at 716-837-1112 because that's what it is. Quick recap, because you just returned back, is I was sharing that I think that you have the ability to not have to conform to those ways, and when you deserve that space, when you are at a certain level where you are now controlling the game versus just trying to just be an, I don't want to say pawn because that sounds so terrible, but you're a person that's just participating in the game. So what does that look like? That means if you're an individual contributor at a company, or if you're a local citizen and you think I don't have the ability to make laws in my community, showing up how you want to show up and your preference without really understanding, well, how are laws made? How are laws impacted? How can I communicate to effective the people who actually control these communities? How can I do that? If you are still trying to learn, stay in that space of learning and be humble. Because at that point, you don't have the privilege to just show up and do whatever you want. And I think sometimes with not just your generation, but even the generation before you, y'all want to get to the finish before you even understand the game. So now you go in and you say things or you make statements or you might show up a certain way without understanding the context of all the reasons why that situation or that scenario is the way it is. So I'll let you go ahead and chime in. I know there's a few people watching. If you're listening in, go ahead and call in. We'd love to hear from you. We want to make Jim proud today.
We're doing our best to keep the show going without the guests, but I'll tell you, I agree, but I think I have difficulty with that because let's look at myself, right? Let's make it real. Let's make it relevant. I'm in a space where I'm a speaker. I'm trying to make it happen. I don't really like suits though. So I don't really wear suits really because that's not really my style. And I guess people could ask me, and people have asked me, we've even talked about it. What is your look? What is your professional look? And I've always said, like, this is me. And I don't think that I don't know what point I'll ever get to where someone's like, oh, you're controlling the space now, you can wear what you want. And I know that can
But don't you think that's different though? But in your scenario, that's a perfect example of an exception. The reason why is that if you're the voice of the youth, then part of that is breaking down the stereotype of what somebody might think they see when you come in. Because even if you're dressed more casual, your body language or your nonverbal communication may not always align with the assumption that people have when they meet you. So let me give you an example. If I met you and your hair is, you got your hair the way it is, you got the earrings, you got your little casual outfit on, but you're self-aware enough to know I need to give a smile, I need to give a handshake, and I need to present myself in a certain way. So then what happens is that then you are actually before you even open your mouth to speak in the area that you're shifting the stereotype on what people may think. And I think sometimes that doesn't always happen.
And I think that why I'm working to remove my job is that I feel like I shouldn't be an exception because what you described, as you said, I know how to explain and position myself. And I think that everybody should be able to do that. I think that if everybody was, if you go to my website, www.martin, you could. If everybody learned how to position themselves, if you want to take a bigger shift from making a change in the community, if you know how to position yourself, that allows you to make a different level of money that everybody can't make. And I talked about this a little bit on my interview when I was the guest with Jim. But positioning yourself absolutely can definitely make you an exception. I think that what you're saying is very true. I think that just the piece I want to focus on though is that what you said is that I am the exception. I am quote unquote an exception, but only so because of my ability to position myself. And that's not an ability only I was born with. A lot of us can speak. It's just about learning how to use it more effectively. And like you talk about, when you can effectively communicate, you can make changes in communities, you can position yourself differently. And all in all, you can just do different things and everybody can do. Because when you can explain why you're doing it, all of a sudden it makes sense. And going back into changing communities when it's relevant and it makes sense, you could see a little bit of me in you. And so even though I have on the Jordans in a board meeting, you say, I see myself in this kid and I want to invest in him. And that's because, like you said, I can position myself through my words.
So how would you encourage another young person that maybe doesn't understand all of those things? Because I don't think that happened overnight, right? It was a process, because you could show up a certain way and still fumble. But I guess my question to you is for these young people that want their voice to be heard, but don't think it's being heard. How can you begin? You know, I know you keep saying go to the website, but let's get real and get some practical applications. For a young person, like you had that event in May and you had a couple of friends, like some of them, I was like, you know what, if you met that kid walking down the street, they don't necessarily smile. Or if you saw this girl, this young lady right here, she may not. What tips would you give a young person to help them be more influential, to communicate more effectively, and then have an impact in the communities that they're in?
I would say first, I need you to understand one thing. And this is when I understood this completely changed the way that I look at relationships. You have to understand that, and I know it sounds terrible, people are transactional to some degree in every relationship. You're my mom, I'm your son, but we don't talk because we're mom and son. We talk a lot. We don't talk a lot because we're mom and son. We talk a lot because I learn mentorship from you and you enjoy speaking to me. That's why we speak a lot, because we know a lot of parents who don't, correct? Right. Me and my friends, we hang out. Not because I got a car and I'm the funniest guy alive. Not because I got a car and I can speak well, but because we get something out of this hanging out session. And so when you understand that providing value is the key to get indoors, the first step to becoming more influential is you have to understand, why should a stranger on the street care? Why? Okay, you make jewelry. Ooh, I'm not trying to get specifics. I know somebody who actually does make jewelry, but I told her this and this is what we talked about. You make jewelry, which is great, but you can't compete on price. It's too many. I go on Amazon and get 50 bracelets for $5. You can't compete on price. And it's not right, but there's people doing this for cents a day overseas. You can't compete on price. You got to compete on story. You got to compete on why should I care about your bracelets. And so the first step to becoming more influential is not doing anything externally. It's internally understanding that you need to provide a value for people to want to listen. And when even within speaking, like I said, I love communication to a T. I think it's one of the greatest skills ever, but I recognize the average kid, the average adult hearing me say I'm a communication consultant doesn't care. No, they don't care. And that sounds terrible. They don't care. And I don't blame them, because why would you? Let's do the exercise in front of you. Why does communication matter? Do you think it matters?
I think communication matters huge.
Well, we've talked a lot. So
But even before you, the reason communication had to work for me, I'm gonna be real honest. Like when I graduated, my college, Lord, thank you for getting me out of college, because my GPA collectively, if it was a 2 point something, but I always knew if I can talk to somebody, I probably can persuade them to give me a shot. Then when they gave me a shot, I had to know, how do I work this out? So I always had to learn how to communicate, because I felt like I had a handicap. You are different than me. Your grades were great, right? So I don't know, but you've been that way since you were little, of knowing how to effectively communicate. So for me, I don't say it just because we talk about it a lot. Even right now, I have to position myself to what you said. If a customer wants to work with me, I know I'm not the cheapest. I don't even try. Matter of fact, I'm not even average. I would say I'm probably very expensive. So that has to be a hard consideration on why someone would want to work with me. But I say if they give me a chance and I can effectively communicate the value to them, not to me, to them, and then I deliver on that, that's when opportunities happen. But for a young person, I think that that's different. That's different because I think I have a history on my side that I could say, here's proven times, and you guys have to position that differently.
I don't even think it's necessarily history. I think you're an exception to the rule, and obviously you are, because that communicational importance to you, but that's what instilled that in me. For most people, they don't know why communication is valuable. Like I said, they don't care. And I know care sounds a little aggressive, but it's the truth. If you don't pay attention to something, it's because you don't care about it, which is fine. I'm not upset about it because people don't understand, right? So what happens is people say, what's communication important? Oh, because you want to talk to people. Why do you want to talk to people? Oh, because, it's nice to, what is that going to do for you? And this is what I tell young people too. What is that going to do for you? You sound clear? What is that going to do? Nobody cares you can sound clear. Communication can help you make money, and now people are listening. Communication will help you get that girl you like, now people are listening. So the first step to become more influential is to understand, what do people care about? Because you got to understand, people live on value systems. I promise you don't go to that grocery store you think you do just because you like it. It's got to be
that is true, because communication, right?
Deeper levels, and so that's in
true.
advertising, that's in product, and that's in marketing. Communication is a universal skill, and so the first step to become more influential is understand why it's important. The second step is understanding what vehicle matters, right? Because you got to work within your skills. So this is a lot of mental work that goes on behind the scenes, which is why communication is a skill that's external, but it's an external representation of your internal state. You got to be right in your head, and these are what I call mind shifts. So first, understanding that you got to understand why it's valuable. The second, you got to understand yourself and understand the vehicle. How are you going to do it? How are you going to explain it? Where do your fish reside? And I learned this late in my gap year. Not even a gap year anymore. I learned this late in my business. I had to hit my head. I had to hit my head a bunch of times.
But that's a question.
And now I can come to tell people honestly, genuinely, because I didn't understand why it was relevant to me.
So see, this is okay, parents. I'm talking to parents for 5 seconds, because I think that's one of the pieces. Like, as parents, we project, right? So we say what's important to a kid for why we think it's important to them. Well, where does the breakdown happen? It's not important to them yet.
Right, because what I was hearing when you were telling me, oh, you should, look at why it's important. I was hearing it like, communication changes communities. I was looking at it from a broad perspective, but buying and selling, changing, influence are emotional decisions. These are emotional decisions. So you got to play. When we talk about this, you can either complain about the game that you're forced to play, or you could play the game until you don't have to play it anymore. And right now, for a lot of people, they don't want to play the game, which is understanding why it matters. We all think our product is most important. And even with parents that you talked about, especially with parents, it wasn't clicking to me the way you were saying it. I had to, like you said, hit my head. But had I been where I am now, I would have asked you, hey, can you just make this make sense a different way?
But with the parents, then how do you, but as a parent, if you see that there's a danger zone that your kid is heading towards, how do they, is that a caller?
Go ahead. I think we have a call. Call, you are more than welcome on the air.
Hi, this is Mrs. Swigert.
Hello.
Mom.
Mrs. Swigert.
Go ahead, you're on the air, we can hear you.
Join the conversation. To join the conversation so people can be more involved in what they're talking about. I think they need to be, they have to learn. And what I mean by that is sometimes people don't communicate correctly because they really don't know what they don't know, and they try to explain to others. And once someone finds out that you really don't know what you're talking about, they become disinterested in what you're saying.
And it's important to build that credibility.
I don't know if she can hear you.
Okay, I don't know if hello?
I'm still here.
Okay, and I was asking you, it's important to you to build that credibility as a speaker, as someone who's providing information, correct?
So how would someone
Right, exactly.
Build that credibility?
So a way you could build credibility.
Someone will build that credibility by being educated. It's just like what I would like to say. Okay, can I just jump to one point?
Go ahead.
Black history. Black history is so important. But if you don't know your history, or you're not reading or studying it or keeping up on it, you can't speak on it. And there's so many people out there that
Hello?
they think that because they hear things over the media, it's true, and it's not true. You have to really dig into it. You have to read books. You have to keep it.
Okay.
Caller, I'm gonna move on because you keep cutting in and out. I think you're listening to us on a different platform, and that's why you're hearing the delay. But I want to answer what you talked about and dive into that credibility. I know we're going to break soon, so I don't want to get too deep on it, but I'll just kind of start to touch on it. Then I'll ask our guest.
Okay, I'm gonna hang up and let you explain.
Okay, thank you for calling in. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mom.
But with credibility, that's very true, right? So you talk about, again, how do you build that credibility? Like she said, is being educated, but not only being educated, I think there's something distinct. And this is what my drum teacher taught me when I was young. A master of their craft can explain it in a way that a 5-year-old can understand. And so what you need to do, same thing I just talked about, is you need to figure out, okay, I have this information. I want to be credible, but you can't be credible if people aren't listening. And like if you know what I'm saying, people still have to listen and take in the information. So once you read and you take it to your brain, you need to learn it and change it and say, how could I teach someone who was young? Because if you could teach someone who was young and make it in a way that everybody can understand, you'll be the most credible person alive. Because I can't check your source if I don't know what you're talking about. And credibility, like, because you can. There's a lot of people who are experts who nobody knows about.
Right.
How credible are you if nobody knows who you are? And that sounds terrible, but we're not getting into businesses to fail. So let's not talk like we are. I think we should just be more authentic. And like I said, I think credibility, even in something like communication, how do I build credibility? It's through being out there more. Right. The information is not going to change, because if we're being honest, like she said, if you don't know the information, go read the information. But once you learn a topic, you're not really probably reinventing the wheel. I say it all the time. We're making innovations and changes, but most of the times they're reiterations of past designs or different or past ideas, right? We're finding.
Yep, we're going to break.
We're going to break. So.
All right, thank you.
Jabbar, I learned about atrial fibrillation the hard way. My symptoms would come and go. Shortness of breath, fatigue. I kept going. Then I got so lightheaded, I couldn't.
Trying to make a show for y'all today. Doing the best we can. Don't got the guests last minute.
Regular heartbeat,
so
heart racing,
doing the best we can
come and go.
I'm going to talk a little bit more about credibility and communication. Communication is all encompassing, and I would love to dive deeper into it on
Bristol Myers Squibb and Pfizer.
Deeper time, but I'm trying to respect what this is. I'm trying to talk about communicational issues and their relevancy to the community.
To stand up gush fears, thanks to always ultra thin with rapid dry technology. It absorbs gushes 2 times faster than the leading store brand, and gives you up to 100% leak-free protection. Hello, clean and comfortable. With always
I think another
fear,
thing
no gush.
that's important is how people, the reason you don't have credibility, it goes back to the topic I was talking about. It's because you're projecting on assumptions.
It's celebrating 50 years
of riding bikes and you're projecting on the gap. Whether you're a ride or die hip-hop head, they're not addressing the gap.
About its origins.
And I think that that's important. So when people project,
AARP, the magazine, it celebrates this incredible milestone.
I think when people do
project
project
brimming with
on
hip-hop facts and history.
What they don't even know, what they don't understand, that's where there's a communication breakdown.
Community is more than where you live. It's the people in it who go above and beyond to help it thrive. During the 50th anniversary of hip-hop and the 75th anniversary of Black radio, AARP recognizes the members, volunteers, people, and partners giving back to our communities. We believe when our efforts drive change for the greater good, we all thrive together.
My question is,
more about how AARP supports efforts to keep our communities thriving, visit aarp.org/blackcommunity.
Hello. Welcome back to the Jim Anderson Morning Show. We missed the guest today, so we're just talking about communicational skills, communicational ways to make changes in the community. I'm joined by my mother, Miss Latasha Martin, who's a business owner in her own right. And we were just talking about credibility, and you had an interesting topic. Oh, we have a caller as well. Caller, you are on the air.
Good morning. My name is Justine Harris. I'm enjoying the conversation.
I appreciate
so
it.
To Mom, I totally agree with you. But to I'm not sure which one of you guys it would be referred to, but here is my viewpoint. In meeting some young people in their 30s, especially during India Walton's campaign for mayor, met a lot of young people, and I mean these young people are what I call super smart, but communicating, they would cuss you out, and I don't tolerate profanity. Unfortunately, I think I have chosen to step back. Because if you say something that they don't agree with, or somebody else say something that they are not in agreement with, they go on Facebook and go ballistic on you, and don't dare ask a question so that you can understand understand, well, what are you asking or what are you saying before, I make a comment? Because as they say, they come for you. And you'd be like, are you kidding me? So I hate to feel like I'm taking a step back and just stay to myself, because it seems like that would be a tool of the enemy to keep us separated and not be able to close that generational gap of moving forward as one. So I'll hang up and listen. Hopefully I made some sense.
No, you definitely did. Definitely. And that
And here,
I'm sorry, I went to go reply, but you can finish. I didn't mean to cut you off.
so I'll hang up and hear what you guys have to say through that. Thank you.
I appreciate the call. I think that is so true. And that disconnect, right? That generational gap is why I got into communication. I think that is a foundational showing of there's a lack in some very important communicational skills, right? We're missing the skill to ask what happened. We're asking the skills to ask, I don't know what you mean. Can you explain it different way? We're lacking those skills in the youth. And what happens is, because people don't know how to ask those questions, jails fill up, graves fill up, because people don't know how to ask those. And when we trust the system that the world's going to teach us. We trust the world's going to teach us. And the issue is, like you said, we're in a world nowadays where everybody want to get famous. Bro, 5 minutes of fame get you a long way. You get 5 minutes of fame, that might lead to a lifetime of riches. So when you talk about small things that blow up and become bigger, everything feels like a viral moment. Why? Because a lot of kids don't understand, like I said, how to have these conversations. And because this isn't a class taught in schools. Now, I'm trying to get into schools. I'm trying to fix this issue. This is, like I said, this is the reason that I got into what I'm doing. I believe that kids want to speak well. Kids want to have the words to say. They want to ask questions. We just don't know how. When you don't know how, what do you do?
But can I just say one thing from the parent perspective and the adult perspective? I think one of the things that I had to learn with my children and children in general is, like, we set an expectation of communication, but what are the influences? So I had to step back. I used to be one of those people that I'd be like, language, but right now I'm like, what are you trying to say? I worked with a coach one time and she said, what is that person trying to articulate? And I think if we get emotional or offended, and I'm not saying that you have to accept people using bad language around you, but what I've learned is that a lot of the kids, the things that they're listening to and influencing them, they may not know how to articulate. So when they're around certain environments, they want to be what that person wants versus just expressing and communicating. And sometimes it might have some colorful language. And so for me, I try to listen to, well, what are they really saying, and giving them the ability to know that I'm not going to bite your head off, but I'm a safe space that you can communicate the best you can. And then as we build that relationship, then we can talk about, well, when you use these words in this environment, it might not necessarily help you. It could hurt you because it could create a barrier. And that's been one of the things as an adult that was a hard transition, because I wasn't raised that way. I was raised on Mr. and Mrs. I was raised that you go in certain places, you don't talk certain ways, you carry yourself a certain way. But to be effective with these young people who really do feel like they were raised different. They ask kids, they ask their parents, they ask adults questions. It may feel like disrespect, but they were raised in a place where people said they had a voice, and they took that. And sometimes it could feel like disrespectful. But I think if you can get to the essence of what that person is saying and try to build that relationship with them, you will see a change in how they treat you and your ability to influence them for other things.
And I understand that communication is a two-way street. So I'm not going to tell you that you should fully, like she was saying, you don't have to accept how anybody is speaking. And it's completely your right in communication to say, I'm not having this conversation anymore. That's one of the biggest parts of communication, learning when it's just not your battle. It's just not this battle for this war. But that being said, I think that kids don't have the words. They don't think they have the words to say it other ways. Words, the curse words, seem like this is the only way you're going to listen to me. And oftentimes when I hear curse words, especially from the youth, what I look like, what I see it, oh, this is me showing, you showing me that you don't feel heard. You feel like you got to use clever language because y'all not listening.
What's going on in the house?
And so there's so many different aspects of communication. What I hope for, the future that I desire, is not a future where people never curse, not a future where people want people to curse. It's a future where when someone curses, they can say, did that make sense? And you can say, yes, I don't like you cursing. They can say, okay, I'll say it another way. That's all I want. I want us to be able to have the conversation. I want you to be able to have that, say what you just said to me on the phone in person, and say, this is how your cursing makes me feel. And they can say, this is why I curse.
I know.
And we can find a happy middle ground. And it sounds so fluffy in the future, but that's how I talk. That's how my relationships are. That's how we do it. We knock things out. We nip things in the bud because oftentimes it's a miscommunication, a misunderstanding. It's a disconnect between intention and perception. And so trying to attack that, that's where I come in. Like I said, I wish I had an all-encompassing fix, but there's not. There's not. It's that's the like I said, that's the physical embodiment of a bunch of communicational breakdowns and missing pieces in their arsenal to effectively explain how they feel. And I say we shouldn't have to curse, but if they do, they do. But that being said, what we need to be able to do is have a conversation regardless. So like I said, I'm not one of these people just sitting here on the sideline saying like, oh yeah, this is an issue. No, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm talking. I talk to the youth. Matter of fact, if you know a youth organization, if you know a youth, reach out, because this is what I do. I help kids find the words to either say it with curse words in a way it doesn't sound bad, or say it where people understand why I'm cursing. Because I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I curse, but I can tell you why, because it's things that I'm passionate about. And I'm not happy about it. I'm not wearing that on my sleeve. I'm not saying that's what everybody should be doing. But what I'm saying is, when you understand why I'm cursing sometimes, it makes a lot more sense. I'm not cursing at you. I'm cursing because I'm passionate. But it's something you got to work on and choose and pick your battle.
But I also think you do need to look at the communities that people come out of. Like, until I started working with different groups of people, and I would see, oh, this kid is communicating this way because this is how they communicate at home. Like, that's the only way. So it might feel like, oh my goodness, they don't do that. But when I have seen people and in their immediate family or the community they're in, that's how they talk, they don't even know it's wrong. They don't even know it's wrong.
And nobody is to say it's wrong. That's what I even want to push back on. Nobody's to say it wrong. We just don't understand why you're doing it, right? Because you knew why they was cursing, you might be like, I get it. If they was like 20 years, I ain't like, you might, someone was struggling for 20 years. I think you might have, let's say you were falsely in prison for 20 years. You came out, you can say whatever you want. I don't write in the car ride home. You want to say blank the government, whatever you want, bro. Because you would understand. You just did 20. You would understand. It would make sense. But it doesn't have to be 20 years of jail. Someone could say, like you said, this is all I've ever been around. I was forced into this environment, and I'm a product of it. Oh shoot. Okay, now I get why you're. We don't do that here. Okay, that's fine. But this is where I do where I'm from.
But I think you have to build that relationship. But you have to build the relationship to have the ability to even get there. That's all I'm saying as adults, especially if you are the authority figure. You have to build sometimes, and it's not fair. Sometimes you have to flex more than you're comfortable with to build the relationship to say they're not judging me. They are trying to hear me. There's just a breakdown. But if there's not that foundation of what I use in my faith walk is love, and love is a decision to take what you say, the communication high road.
Right. And I think that even what you just talked about, building that relationship, to me, building a relationship is showing that I want to listen and I want to dialogue. I want to have a conversation. That's the work of building a relationship, is transferring of ideas, of feelings, and knowing that transformation is appreciated. That's how a relationship is built. And so, again, like she was saying, understanding the context is important. However, like I said, as a communication person, I do believe that even if you don't know somebody, the best way to build a relationship with somebody is what? Demonstrate that I want to listen. That's one of the best ways. So that's all I would advise. If you want a tandem piece of advice, next time they're cursing and swearing, because like you said, you want to make a change in the community. We need people like you to make a change. We need everybody from every generation to make a change, because everybody plays a wheel. Everybody's a cog in the wheel of change we're trying to make. That being said, I would ask you, say, why are you cursing? Because we assume that it's coming from negative or because we're bad. But like my mom said, and like I said, some people just curse because that's where their heart space is at. They curse because they never felt heard. And not feeling heard at home, all those developmental things, which I'm not a specialist on, but all those developmental things that happen at home come out in different ways, right? Come out in different ways. Some people get angry and fight, people get angry and shut down. So we can't always tell you how different experiences and different decisions impact people on the long run. And cursing is one of those things that I think is such a personal decision that is difficult to make, like I said, all around encompassing decisions or all around encompassing advice regarding cursing. But if you can do anything, just ask why. And if the answer is something you don't like, and like I said, it's completely your right to say, I walk away, I'm cursing because I want to curse. Well, can we not? Right? And in front of me, I can't hear you win. But you have, again, it all builds on, to me, that relationship. And then the other piece that I would even say to that is ask more questions instead of projecting thoughts on what you think you see or what you think you heard. So if somebody says something and it's triggering something in you,
maybe you're not even responding to that person. You're responding to another scenario where that something that it looked the same happened. So I always encourage, and I know I ask a lot of questions. I do ask a lot of questions, but I think the reason I ask a lot of questions is because I don't want to jump to assumptions, because so many assumptions have been made about me. And so I want to give some, and I will sit there and I will ask the questions for as long as that person can tolerate. And it's not a question to you know how some people will ask a question because they're trying to build their rebuttal. I'm sincerely asking questions, seeking, like Stephen Covey says, I am seeking to understand, not based on my perspective, but for the person that's in front of me. I want them to be able to break it down to the best of their ability so I can understand.
And how do you have the patience to do that? That starts with understanding. Like you said, when you started the call, what did you say? You want to make a change, right? I know you want to instill good into the youth. People want to invest into the youth. So staying in touch with that goal, you got to understand what we just said, what Mom just said isn't fun, that isn't easy. But as a communicator and as a leader, these are the decisions that come with the power that you get. With great power comes great responsibility. And part of that responsibility is, like you said, you have to sometimes flex a little bit because we're not looking at this battle. We're looking at the quote unquote war. I don't even like that term or that analogy. We're looking at the greater picture. We're pulling back the scope to look at, yes, I'm gonna have to sit here with this kid and ask why he's cursing for 15 minutes. But if that's what's necessary for us to make a change, I'm here to make a change.
Right.
So, and then when you look at it like that, the little things that are required aren't as big a deal. And like I said, that goes both ways. And I'd love to talk more to the youth that you're talking about. So if you want to bring me in, you can.
But I think the other thing that I want people to understand is I think you and I communicate great, but it doesn't mean we always agree. It doesn't mean that sometimes we can't take a 20-second, using Philip Edge, take a 20-second time out. It doesn't mean that it's always the right time to have those conversations. But I think you need to understand the foundation. And you taught me this. What's the foundation of that relationship? For us, it's love. And no matter what, you're my son and I'm your mom. And that is greater than any emotional moment I could have. And so I think that when it comes to all of these things that we're trying to influence and have an impact on, the best thing that I learned from you, like I learned this from you, is that you need to understand, you know, what am I dealing with when I'm having this conversation? Am I willing to put my guards down and be vulnerable to what I say that this relationship is really about? Like defining that. And I think as leaders in communities, when you go into those communities and you talk to people, nobody wants to live in a place that everybody looks down on. Nobody wants that. But if people are there, they're not looking down on it because that's their home. So we need to stop jumping to conclusions in communication. And you really did teach me that. Like, you're very humble in this space. And when people are listening and they're like, why would they call you? It's because you are really good that wherever you go, you want to be kind. You want to make things better, utilizing communication than where it started. And so I think if anyone is listening to this and you are struggling in any type of conversation, I know that he is my son, but there are so many other things that he has done for me professionally as a business owner, as a wife, as a mother, as a friend, as a daughter. Like, you've guided me through that, coaching me with the skills, because when we have those conversations, I'm not mom. I'm somebody with a communication problem or crisis. And I come to you because you help me logically break that down. So this ain't for the emotional people. This is for people who really want to have effective change in communications. I know I'm up here tearing up. Like, communication, it is like, what is the logical piece to it? And that's really important when it comes to communication. I think so many relationships, so many communities, so much manipulation happens when people are not getting to the root of things. And so I'm going to transition it back to you because I know there's only a few minutes left. And I really want you to, like, even help people to say, like, who is this for? You almost sell yourself, but I would say, I know I said I was going to stop, is that if you are a business leader and your teams are terrible, if you are a pastor and your congregation is not growing and you are dwindling with young people and you don't understand where's the bridge, it's not about, like, I was watching the Stellar Awards. It's not about more smoke, more lights, and nothing like that. It's some different things that young people are looking for. If you are a parent that is struggling because you're like, my kid is always on their phone and they never answer, like, I would encourage you to set up a call with Austin, and that's what I would say. So go
absolutely ahead. And I think that we've been talking about, if you don't got email, you can even call me. I don't want to give my number out because I ain't my Google number yet, but
goodness,
you know, I'll give it out. You know what? 716-250-8787. If you want to have a conversation and talk about it, because what she was talking about it is so true. I have helped us talk about things such as small as my kids on the phone, they don't answer. And we went as big as I'm in an organization and my teams don't communicate. Communication isn't ubiquitous, which means everywhere. It's an everywhere skill. And something else you talked about is it is a skill. Sometimes you have lapses in judgment. I don't want people to think I'm talking as a communicational guru. No. There's things I struggle with. I'm terrible at asking for support. I'm not good with it, right? And I'm a communication coach, and I still struggle with that. So we all struggle with things. The difference is I'm looking at it logically, and I want to talk especially on that. I think people get confused about it. I think I'm coming in to try to inspire you. I don't want to inspire nothing, bro. I don't really care if you're inspired. That sounds terrible. I don't really care if you're inspired. I'm here to change your mind, not your heart. And the issue with that is people don't understand what that means. It's a 3-step process, and the first step is discovery to figure out what is the real issue and how do we fix it. It's not hard, but like I said, Mom, it's not relevant. People don't want to change bad enough. People will call and say people are doing this, but then you won't call to get it fixed. So I pray that y'all listen. I know that it's something important, and even when we talk about assumptions, it impacts so many more areas of our lives than people think about. Past community change, making assumptions ruins people's lives. Let's talk about assumptions. I used to make this assumption every time that I would go to the gym. It was going to be busy and I was going to have a bad workout, so I wouldn't go to the gym. I'm 6'3", 140. I need to be in the gym. I need to be eating in the gym and in the kitchen. But guess what? I wasn't going because I was assuming that when I was going to get there, it was going to be terrible. I had to communicationally coach myself and say, how are you talking to yourself? And why are you assuming that everything's going to be negative? Because God didn't write that in your ability list. That wasn't one of your gifts. You didn't get clairvoyance. You can't predict the future, so you better just go and find out what it is. That's a communicational thing, because you talk to yourself, right? It's not just one of you in your head. I'm not trying to sound crazy, but you talk to yourself. How you talk to yourself is communication. How you talk to others is communication. How you talk in business is communication. How you talk at home. These are all communicational areas that I help with, and with assumptions especially. You will assume that your issue isn't communication based.
And I would say
I can't get you a 6-pack with communication. I'll tell you that.
But yes, you can, because if they communicate to themselves the right way, they will create habits to help them get their 6-pack. You laugh. You said it's a stretch. I don't think it's a stretch, because self-talk is real.
It isn't real. I'm not gonna say that is true, but I'm not saying if you want a 6-pack, come to me first. I can't say that. But what I can say is that if you have issues in your life, whether you know the cause or not, I guarantee they're impacted by communication in one way or another. Because it involves you or others. Guess what? It's communication. Marketing, communication. Money, business, communication. Right? Logistics, communication. So I don't want to over exemplify, but what I want you to take away from this, the goal for this conversation is this. The goal for the conversation is this. If you are in the community, if you're listening, if you're somewhere and you want to make a change, just don't sleep on communication as the way, because it's so much bigger than we realize. It's so much bigger than we think. And things small, such as cursing, are bigger than you think. Things small, like not answering the phone, I know we keep touching on that, but that's important. Your kid on the phone don't answer the phone, bigger than you think. But also it's fixable. It's fixable. And when we look at it like that, the things are fixable. Our communities are fixable, right? We cry at politicians, but they're fixable by us. But how do we do that? Is we have to be able to communicate. And I know we only have about a couple minutes left, so I don't know exactly, what you want to.
I think that I do want to go back to, and I appreciate everyone listening today. I know that Austin's contact information is on the screen, but I do want to do one more time because I know I'm shifting back to our original guest. The original guest that was supposed to be here was from Cooperation Buffalo. It is the Cooperative Academy. The applications are due today, August 7th. It is a 12 weeks in-person experiential thing on how do you run a business where your employees are actually part owners. And so if you want more information, go to the link that's online. It's just www.cooperationbuffalo.org. You can go right to the homepage and click on that Learn More and apply. The deadline is today. So I just want to wrap up and just say thank you again, Jim, for trusting us with your space. We appreciate that. If you want to get in touch with Austin, the contact information is online. And Austin, you can go ahead and close us out.
Absolutely. Again, like I said, logistically, we didn't get the guests today, but I hope that all the listeners got to have at least get something, get a nugget, get something from the conversation. Next week, we should be back with our regular guest schedule. It's been a pleasure, and we're off the air. Have a good one, Buffalo.
Thanks. Bye-bye.